of eugenics?
Margaret Sanger.
Margaret Sanger.
This is what's his face? George Bernard Shaw.
Get the George Bernard Shaw audio too ready, will you?
Yeah.
If you don't know, the progressives are the ones who came up with eugenics, and you have to excuse some of them in the early 1900s because science had just, in 1870, 1880, you had people like Edison saying there's no reason to wire everybody's houses with anything but DC battery power, DC electricity, because you'll never have anything in your house that is electric, really, except for lights. I mean, even Edison didn't see what was coming. Within 10 or 15 years, the whole world had begun to change. And now there was science, and that's where electric shocks came in. Let's do electric shock therapy. And you had Darwin, and all these things were happening all the same time. And Marx. So you had Nietzsche, Marx, electricity, technology. Everything was changing and converging into one. So you had a bright, beautiful tomorrow. You had a beautiful, better living through eugenics. I have the books. Tomorrow, next week, we'll do a special show on this because you have to know this history. And in one of them by the guy who, I'm trying to remember his name. Shoot, it's The Phantom Public is the name of the book by Walter Lippmann. Walter Lippmann is extraordinarily loved by the media. He is the father of modern media. He was one of the fathers of CBS and CBS News. He was part of the Wilson administration. Really dangerous guy. He helped put together the Council on Foreign Relations. And in his book called The Phantom Public, he talks about people who are just too stupid. And they'll never get it. And they vote and they think they're doing the right thing, but they just don't know. And it's because of genetics. Genetics just show that they'll just never get it. And they'll continue to push us into the background. But he talks about how eugenics and scientists are now looking to ways to build the perfect voter. And someday we'll be able to weed out these genetic flaws in people, and we'll have people who are all progressives. But in the meantime, what we're going to have to do is brainwash and trick some of these people. This was the great hope of the progressives during the Wilson administration and the Theodore Roosevelt administration, from the turn of the century up until it was wildly discredited by the Germans. I'll bring in next week letters from the Nazis to the progressives in California saying, you brought all this progressive stuff over, you brought all this eugenic stuff, you guys, we can't thank you enough. May you never forget what you've done in Germany, because you have now put the state on this track, and the things that we're going to be able to do because of what you taught us scientifically will never be forgotten. Oh, that's true. We even have signs that say, never forget. They were responsible. These ideas that happened in Nazi Germany came from the progressive movement in the United States of America, secondarily from the Fabian socialists in England. It was a poison from the West that went east. And there are those who still believe it. We had we told you a story of a big lefty in Ceylon that wrote just last week that all men are not created equal. All life is not equal. She said, let's be honest. We all know that a baby is, she said, when I was carrying my children, I always knew that was a baby in there. So let's stop this bogus argument. We all know it's a baby. Let's just be upfront and let's use the real argument. All life is not equal. That goes against everything that Americans used to stand for. But David Barton gave me an extraordinarily wild fact. Does anybody remember last night? I think it was 60% of the American people that voted didn't know that the Constitution was the supreme law of the land this last November? In exit polls, 60% didn't know. How do you win? How does America survive if you don't even know, not know the Constitution, not know that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land? That is terrifying. So not all people are created equal. You now have the president, through executive order, doing studies on who should and who shouldn't have guns. He's demonizing anybody who's on the other side, saying there's something wrong, and I will not have these people stand in the way of progress. He's co-opting and now controlling our doctors and our hospitals. They have a death panel. It wasn't in the health care bill. As we told you at the time, it was in the stimulus package. They're right now having a hard time getting anybody to go on this death panel because those are the people who's going to decide who lives and dies. And if you have an attitude that not all life is created equal, if you are funding death camps by the name of Planned Parenthood, forget about your FEMA camp. Your death camp in America is Planned Parenthood, and you're funding it. When the world is going towards no value on life, and when your world is going towards a place where it's so egomaniacal, there is no one but them. No one but the individual. No one else matters. I want mine, Grandma. You had yours. I was promised this. When you have a world that is so intertwined, and in 5 years from now, you will not recognize our society, the beginning of the singularity is already here. The merging of man and machine, the merging of reality and total virtual reality, but a reality you will not be able to tell the difference between. Stu, do you remember when I said to you back in the 90s, there's going to come a day where you won't believe your eyes because they'll be able to make any image on camera, any picture, it won't matter. You could just, and we're there now. Would you agree?
Yeah, sure.
I'm telling you now, you will not be able to tell the difference between virtual reality and real reality sometime down the future, probably in the next 10 years. That changes everything. All of this technology that is going on right now. Do you know who's teaching ethics on technology? And now that's not a rhetorical question. We can't find anyone. They're not teaching ethics. When it comes to technology, they're not teaching ethics. And so now Al Gore comes out and he says on NBC for all the world to hear, and if you know anything at all about eugenics, if you know about the early 20th century progressives, which Hillary Clinton said she is cut from that cloth, I am one of the early 20th century progressives, all eugenics, all Marxist wannabes, just they're not Marxist, they just want the Marxist utopia without the revolution. That's the 20th century progressive, early 20th century progressive. And they're almost unanimously cheerleaders for eugenics and weeding out the weak. If you know anything about that, listen to what Al Gore just said.
The scientists now know that there is in human nature a divide between what we sometimes call liberals and conservatives, and it gives an advantage, you can speculate, to the human species to have some people who are temperamentally inclined to try to change the future and experiment with new things, and others who are temperamentally inclined to say, hey, wait a minute, not too fast. And when these natural tendencies are accentuated with political ideologies, or for that matter, religious factions and the other divides that are sometimes used for advantage, then it can get out of hand.
Can it? And then what do? So you are born just only able to understand the future or dragging us back into the past. And then people will put a label on that. You'll either go into religion or you'll become a conservative.
Well, if you're one of those that are holding us back, of course you'll go into religion.
Yeah, or conservative.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're a Democrat, a liberal, and you're an atheist. You're a scientist.
Mm-hmm.
Extraordinarily dangerous. Maybe I'm reading it wrong. maybe I'm just reading too much into it. Maybe I've read too much history.
I found the story, the study he's talking about. It comes from New Scientist, British weekly scientific magazine. The title, Two Tribes, Are Your Genes Liberal or Conservative? Delves into the serious scientific research on the formation of political opinions. I remember us talking about this story when it happened, because it talks about how conservatives are dogmatic, routine-loving individuals, while liberals come across as free-spirited and open-minded.
Well, that's how they come across, yes.
Yeah. According to the emerging data, political positions are substantially determined by biology and can be stubbornly resistant to reason. These views are deep-seated and built into our brains. Trying to persuade someone not to be a liberal is like trying to persuade someone to not have brown eyes. We have
maybe we should get some twins.
Then it goes on, dogmatic types, more conservative. Those who express interest in new experiences tended to be liberals. A much stronger link exists between political orientation and openness, which psychologists define as including traits such as an ability to accept new ideas, a tolerance for ambiguity, and an interest in different cultures.
Oh, my gosh.
When these traits are combined, people with high openness scores turned out to be almost twice as likely to be liberals.
Openness? How do you describe liberals as open to anything? They're not open to anything but their own opinions.
Can I tell you something?
That's it.
Penn Jillette is, and I'm sorry.